The negotiation started simply enough. Warren Beatty sat across from 3 studio executives in a conference room at Paramount Pictures. It was early 1977. On the table, A Deal for Heaven Can Wait, a romantic comedy Beatty would produce, co-direct, co-write, and star in. The studio was interested. Beatty had just come off Shampoo, a massive hit. He had leverage. They knew it. The first offer came quickly. $2 million upfront, the lead executive said, plus 10% of net profits after we recoup. It was a strong offer, more than most actors made, back-end participation that could add millions if the film succeeded. Beatty looked at the contract, read through the net profits clause, the definition of recoupment, the deductions for marketing, distribution, overhead. Then he slid it back. I want gross. The executive blinked. Gross, from $1, a percentage of every ticket sold, before you deduct anything. The room went completely silent. One of the other executives leaned forward. Warren, that's not how back-end deals work. Net profits are standard. You'll participate after we recoup our investment. I understand the standard, Beatty said. I'm asking for something different. What you're asking for doesn't exist. Then create it. This isn't a story about Warren Beatty inventing profit participation. Actors had been getting back-end deals since the studio system was dying, and profit sharing became a way to attract talent without paying massive upfront salaries. But there was a problem buried in how those deals were structured. Net profits. The term sounds fair. The studio invests money. They recoup that investment. Then you split the profits. Except net profits was a carefully constructed lie. Studios didn't just recoup production costs. They added distribution fees, marketing budgets, overhead charges, interest on the money they'd spent. By the time all the deductions were calculated, most films, even successful ones, showed zero net profit on paper. Actors who'd negotiated for 10% of net would watch their films make $50 million at the box office and receive almost nothing. It was legal, it was standard, and it was designed to ensure the studio kept most of the money. Warren Beatty understood this system intimately, and he decided he wasn't participating in it anymore. The executives tried to explain the economic. Warren, gross participation is reserved for the most extraordinary circumstances. We can't just hand out gross points. Why not? Beatty asked. Because we take the financial risk. We fund the production. We handle distribution. We deserve to be paid first. You'll still be paid first, Beatty said. Just not out of my share. Another executive jumped in. If we give you gross, we're essentially guaranteeing you money regardless of whether the film is profitable for us. Exactly, Beatty replied. The lead executive sat back. Warren, be reasonable. We're offering you one of the largest back-end deals in Hollywood. 10% of net is significant money if this film performs. If it performs according to your accounting, Beatty said. I've seen how net profits get calculated. I'm not interested in theoretical money that disappears into overhead charges. Then what are you interested in? Real money. From real revenue. No creative accounting. The executive's tone hardened. What you're asking for would set a precedent we can't afford. If we give gross points to you, every actor with leverage will demand the same thing. Beatty stood up. Then I guess you're going to have a problem. He walked out. Here's what Warren Beatty had calculated, that the studio didn't want to acknowledge. The system only worked if actors accepted it. For decades, actors had been signing net profit deals because they didn't understand the accounting or because they didn't have enough leverage to demand something better. But Beatty had leverage. He was producing, directing, writing, and starring. The project didn't exist without him, and he'd done his homework. He knew how much studios made from successful films. He knew where the money went. He knew that zero net profits didn't mean the studio hadn't made money. It meant they'd structured the deal to keep it all. He wasn't asking for something unreasonable. He was asking for transparency, and that was more dangerous than asking for more money. The studio didn't call back for 3 weeks. They were waiting for Beatty to reconsider, to accept reality, to take the deal that was already extraordinarily generous by Hollywood standards. Beatty didn't reconsider. He took the project to United Artists. They were a smaller studio, more willing to experiment, and they were desperate for a hit. Beatty walked into that meeting with the same ask: gross profits from $1. United Artists executives had the same concern, the same objections, the same warnings about precedent. But they also had something Paramount didn't: the knowledge that if they said no, Beatty would walk again, and they couldn't afford to lose him. So they said yes. Not happily, not easily, but they restructured the deal. Beatty would get a lower upfront salary, $500,000 instead of $2 million. But he'd receive a significant percentage of gross revenue starting from the first dollar the film earned. The risk shifted. If the film flopped, Beatty made less. If it succeeded, he made exponentially more. Beatty signed immediately. Heaven Can Wait began production in late 1977. The shoot was smooth. Beatty co-directed with Buck Henry. They came in on budget. The film was charming, funny, well-crafted. It opened in June 1978. The box office was extraordinary. Over $80 million domestic, one of the highest-grossing films of the year. Under a traditional net profits deal, Beatty would have made maybe $3 to $4 million after deductions. Under his gross profits deal, he made over $15 million. The studio executives at Paramount, the ones who'd refused his ask, watched those numbers and realized they'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. Not because they'd lost money. Heaven Can Wait was profitable for United Artists, but because Warren Beatty had just proven that gross points deals were not only possible, they were lucrative for everyone involved. Here's what changed in the years after Heaven Can Wait. Every A-list actor started demanding gross points. Not net, gross. Studios resisted. They argued it would destroy their business model, that they couldn't afford to give away revenue before recouping costs. But actors had seen the math. They'd watched Warren Beatty make $15 million from a film that under traditional accounting might have shown minimal net profit, and they had leverage. If you were a star who could open a film, you could now point to Beatty's deal and say, "I want that." Studios adapted. They had to. By the mid-1980s, gross participation deals were standard for major actors, not because studios wanted to pay more, because refusing meant losing the talent they needed. The entire compensation structure in Hollywood shifted. Actors stopped accepting the premise that net profits were fair. They stopped trusting studio accounting. They demanded transparency through gross points deals that couldn't be manipulated. Warren Beatty hadn't just negotiated a better deal for himself. He'd broken the system that kept everyone else underpaid. The studio that had refused Beatty never publicly acknowledged their mistake. But privately, the calculation was clear. They'd protected a precedent that was already dying. They'd avoided setting an example that was going to be set anyway. And in the process, they'd lost one of the most successful films of 1978. That math didn't look good in any boardroom. Years later, an executive from that original Paramount meeting was asked what he'd learned from the Warren Beatty negotiation. His answer was honest, that we were protecting a system that only worked because nobody questioned it. Once someone with enough leverage questioned it, the system couldn't survive. That's the clarity most people in power never develop. They assume the rules exist because they're fair or necessary. Warren Beatty assumed the rules existed because nobody had forced them to change yet. Here's the part that matters beyond Hollywood. This wasn't about Warren Beatty being greedy. This was about understanding how you're actually getting paid. Most people accept the compensation structure they're offered because it sounds reasonable, a salary, maybe a bonus, perhaps some profit sharing if things go well. But reasonable sounding doesn't mean fair. Beatty looked at the net profits clause and saw something most actors missed. A system designed to look generous while keeping most of the money with the people who already had it. He didn't argue it was unfair in moral terms. He just refused to participate. And by refusing, he forced the system to offer something real. The ripple effect went beyond actor compensation. It changed how power was negotiated in Hollywood. Before Beatty's gross points deal, leverage was mostly about upfront money. How much could you negotiate as a salary? After, leverage became about structure, not just how much you got paid, but when and how. That's a different kind of negotiation. It requires understanding the business deeply enough to know where the money really flows, and having enough confidence to demand access to those flows instead of accepting whatever distribution system is offered. Most people never develop that understanding. They accept the structure they're given and negotiate within it. Warren Beatty negotiated the structure itself. Paul Newman understood control through ownership. Warren Beatty understood control through payment structure. Both of them looked at the systems Hollywood offered and said, "This isn't designed in my interest." And both of them had enough leverage to force something better into existence. Real power isn't accepting the best deal available. It's changing what deals are available. Think about how you're compensated in your work. Do you understand where the money flows? Do you know what you're not being told? And if you don't, why haven't you asked? If this story resonated, subscribe. More stories about structure, leverage, and the moments when changing the rules was the only way to get paid fairly.